now. So as I said, this session is being recorded, so you can rename yourself if that's an issue for you, or hide your picture. If not, please stay like that. It's great. Links, pictures, and photos and recording, they will be made available to the Meetup page and social pages. For those who already follow my YouTube page, this recording will end up there. If not, I will post the link in the Meetup page afterwards, and you can then find it. There will be a Q&A at the end of this session. I'll put the Sli.do available. I think it's already been shared via the email, but I will put it in the chat in a few moments so that you can put your questions there. We may end up opening the mic as well if there are not enough questions or we cover everything and we still have time. And before you go, please leave your feedback using the feedback form that will also be shared. So just something that I forgot. So the agenda. So we are joining the Zoom call, which we're already doing. We are doing the introduction and the icebreaker. Then we will start with the session and the Q&A, and we should close around 6:30, 6:40. Okay. So now I'd like Sli.do. Where is the Sli.do? I'm going to share the Sli.do because I have an icebreaker prepared for you guys. And this is the bit where is chat? Okay, so I'm going to put here on the chat. So if you could join the Sli.do, and I'm going to activate poll and sharing here on the screen, present. So the topic today is about emotional intelligence. I'd like you to tell what's one word that comes to your mind when you hear emotional intelligence. We already have one, empathy.
Okay.
So we have empathy, understanding, communication, awareness, others, right decision making, mindfulness, resilience. And this topic is quite nice because we are celebrating the Mental Health Awareness Week. And I do feel that emotional intelligence is so much related with it, but I don't want to speak much more. I'll probably let Rob talk about that. He probably has something, can give more insights about it. Okay. Thank you for those who have. I'm going to activate the next one. So even those who didn't know anything about emotional intelligence, with these hints, probably you are a little bit more informed. But and taking that into account, and this is really self-evaluation, but just to have an idea, where do you think you would rate yourself from 1 to 5, your level of emotional intelligence? Being 5, highly intelligent emotionally, and 1 low.
Interesting stats, top end.
That's good. What I hope is after the session, people will get to know more about emotional intelligence and will be able to practice more. And one day, everyone will be under 5.
I like that, Rashid.
That's
Low with my 5-year-old
what
son.
I know Rashid is very high emotional intelligence. I know Rashid. So. Okay, cool. So I'm going to stop it. Please stay on Sli.do. As I said, we are going to use the same Sli.do for the Q&A. So there is a section there, audience Q&A, which then you can use it to put your question or upvote any similar question if there is that you were going to put, but it's already there. You can just simply upvote it. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I am almost at that bit where I will pass over to Rob. But before that, just a few words. So my guest today is Rob Hoblin. I know Rob from the Toastmasters. So he was my mentor at the Toastmasters when I was still there, but I still go to Rob and we are comfortable on that. So if I need something, any advice, and I see in Rob a very good and experienced coach as well. Nothing related with Agile, but professional coaching. So without not revealing anything else, I'll just hand over now to Rob. Rob, please introduce yourself a little bit more.
Thank you, Wilson. Thanks very much, and good to see everybody, and good to know we've got a really diverse and international audience this evening as well, which is fantastic. I'm just going to share my screen, if I may, as well, just to make sure that I get the right slideshow in the right order. So I know it's going to tweak it around a little bit very quickly. I know it's the wrong way around at the moment. I will get it the right way around. So hopefully we've got a full slide. Wilson, can you just confirm with a thumbs up I've got a full slide there? Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to do a presentation on emotional intelligence and hopefully get some links to Agile and what you all do within Agile. My background is I was in policing for 30 years. I went through the ranks in policing very quickly. And for my last 10 years, for a third of my service, I was a chief superintendent, doing all things that we can do operationally as chief superintendents. I left policing 7 years ago, and I've traveled the world, believe it or not, all the continents nigh on, doing leadership and management training, and in particular some coaching as well. And I've picked up emotional intelligence in depth probably in the last kind of 4 years, I would say. So what we're going to cover this evening, and please use chat. Wilson, just give me a heads up if anything comes in and I miss. I'm really want to try and make it as interactive and as engaging for you as we can, rather than me just giving you lots of information and kind of putting you to sleep at 6 o'clock at night, which is not the intention. So just to have a look at what we're going to do, we'll just have a look at the difference between EQ and IQ. What's the difference? We've got these lovely acronyms, and what do they mean? We'll have a look at how to improve our own self-awareness. I was quite interested to see the words coming into Sli.do, Wilson. I didn't see self-awareness come in there at all, which kind of surprised me a little bit, and I'll tell you for why in a minute. How can we implement self-management? Once we're really self-aware, then the next step in emotional intelligence is to actually manage ourselves. And that's where sometimes things can go wrong. Using social awareness, this is for me the third step, social awareness. So once we become self-aware, once we can self-manage, how about all those around us? How about all of those in our agile world? How might we manage our colleagues, and how might they manage us as well? And then I did see the word empathy quite a few times, which was great, and empathetic. Empathetic listening is a really good skill to have within emotional intelligence as well. So how do we use empathy to drive results? And then I'm just going to talk about a little bit about, if you may let me, about the EQI 2.0 wheel. And I'll tell you why that particular wheel when we get to it. And then we've got a very short case study of a guy. It's a real live case. Duncan has let us use this just to prove the point on emotional intelligence. But before we do that, I think the first thing we probably have to do is make sure we've all got some clarity around what we think emotional intelligence is. It's quite an often used term, but I'm not convinced everybody knows what it is. So emotional intelligence, the guru is this guy called Daniel Goleman. Still around today, he's written lots of books on it. And he says it's defined as the ability to identify, assess, and control one's own emotions. So that's that self-management piece. It's also the emotions of others. That's the social awareness piece, and that of groups that we are in. And I think in terms of your world, that is pretty important, that we've got a good level of emotional intelligence. That was a quote from Daniel in 1995. He actually wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, for those that like reading, in 1994. Absolutely superb book. So just taking it on from there then, this difference between EQ and IQ, because we do hear the terminology and we think, what the heck do those things actually, EQ and IQ? So first of all, it's one of the big questions that I always get before we even get to this question is, what's the difference between EQ and EI? So there we go. There's two different languages straight away. EQ is emotional quotient and EI is emotional intelligence. Lots of people will use them interchangeably. Emotional intelligence, obviously the EI. The measurement of your emotional intelligence is the emotional quotient. That's what EQ stands for. It's the emotional quotient. But I say some people get it mixed up and actually not absolutely sure which letters we should be using. So if we're talking about emotional intelligence generically, that's EI. If we're talking about somebody's level of emotional intelligence, the measured level and the proper measured level, that is definitely EQ, emotional quotient. So let's have a look at this difference between EQ and IQ. So EQ, emotional quotient, what are we measuring? We're measuring people's self-awareness. Self-aware are we? We're then moving on to that next step I talked about. We're measuring self-management. How do we control ourselves in everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, whether that's at work or whether that's at home? Interesting to see Rashid talking about his children, and it is about that part of it as well. How are we emotionally with our children? I've got my own take on this. I think if we taught children emotional intelligence from 5 years old onwards, the world would be a far better place. Sadly, I know here in the UK, we don't teach emotional intelligence at school at all. Not in my day anyway. Whether it's been introduced recently, I don't know, but I don't think it has. Social awareness, that's more about everybody around us, whether that's colleagues at work, whether that's clients, whether that's suppliers, whoever we deal with on a work basis. That's what I mean by social awareness. But also out of work, who do we socialize with? And how much do we know about the people that we are mixing with? And then once we've got that social awareness and we know the people that we're working with or the people that we're socializing with, how do we build relationships? How do we maintain those relationships? So that's what EQ is all about. That's why we talk about emotional intelligence in that context. Then we've got this lovely thing called IQ, the intellectual quotient. I personally have never taken an IQ test. I'm not sure if anybody in the audience has. Your IQ is all about your intellectual capability and ability. It's that ability to analyze. And I'm sure in the agile world, there's lots of analysis goes on. Whether it becomes analysis paralysis, I'm not sure. But certainly in my old world of police, we had far too much analysis going on. We then talk about logic in the intellectual quotient. This whole thing about how brainy somebody might be. Then we talk about rational abilities. Are we able to deal with things rationally and think them through? So IQ is concerned with verbal. It's also concerned with spatial, and it's also concerned with visual. And then the last bit of IQ is all about mathematical. I'll give you the good news. Good news, everybody in this audience has peaked with their IQ. Everybody. No matter what you want to tell me, you cannot get it any better than what it was when you were around about 19 years old. Our IQ peaks around about the 19-year-old mark. EQ doesn't peak at all until maybe your late 60s, early 70s. What's that? That's good news for everybody in this audience. I didn't think I saw any 60-year-olds in the audience or 70-year-olds. Good news for all of us. Every single person on this call, including me, we can improve our emotional quotient. That is an absolute dead cert. Everybody, no matter where you think you were. So anybody put themselves at 5 on that Sli.do, you can get better than 5. Trust me, absolutely, you can get better than 5. So what does all this mean then? How do we improve our self-awareness? What I'd like to do, if possible, maybe use chat, because I can see chat. Can you put in chat how you might think, especially those that maybe put a 3 earlier, how can you improve your self-awareness? How might you be able to do that? I'll be really interested to see what you put in chat for that. And I'm sure you might do this within the Agile world and in the Vodafone world. So how do we improve our self-awareness? That's the first step of emotional intelligence. Knowing self. How do we get to know self? We've got meditation, listen more, Wilson, yeah. Mediate, training, Fernando, superb, really good. There's one particular word I'm looking for. Yeah, me time, Magdalena, loving that. There's one particular word I haven't seen yet. Yeah, one word I haven't seen.
If
Yeah.
I may, while people are giving these answers, there is one thing that I forgot to mention is why did I ask Rob to come and present about this when we are a meetup about Agile and Scrum and Kanbans and methods and processes. So I do feel like as a Scrum Master myself, where I don't have authority over people, I started more and more being more self-aware and be more mindful because I have to constantly to deal with, I don't know, with people being not open to change, or they don't can or they can't take feedback, or they don't agree in many ways when I ask them to do something. So, instead of me starting getting upset, I started me being more self-aware as well as, okay, what does this mean to me? What is probably going on in the other person's mind as well, so that I can start helping that person as well. So I do feel it's very much related with the Agile world, and for any leader, having authority or not, I think emotional intelligence is quite a very good topic. So that was the only thing I wanted to add that I forgot in the beginning.
That's okay. One thing you did do, and I still haven't seen the word, funny enough, you brought in the word I was looking for. One of the key ways that we do it, and some brilliant words, so thanks for the interaction, everybody. It's really good. Is feedback. However we get feedback. Feedback is telling us something. Whether we like it or whether we don't like it, we have to listen to it, and it's up to us what we do about it. That's the next stage. That's that self-management piece. If you ignore it, that's up to you. If you do something about it, that is up to you as well. So feedback is one of the crucial ones. But let me just go. Thanks so much, everybody. That was really good. Some fantastic words in there. And they're going to take us through the kind of things that we can do to improve our self-awareness. So one of the things we can do, as I've mentioned already, is ask for feedback. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the words, please give me feedback. How do you think I did? What could I have done better? There's so many different lovely open questions we could ask of our colleagues or our customers or our clients or our friends about how we obtain that feedback. Many different ways in which we can do it. So I'd really think about, as wide as possible, how might I do that? And it can be, as I've mentioned, friends, colleagues, suppliers, buyers, whoever you deal with on a day-to-day basis at work or at home or within any of the hobbies that you do as well. So it's really important. So bottom line for me is we can get the feedback from everyone. And that's pretty crucial that we take that on board and we think about how might I get that then. There's a lovely model. I don't know if anybody follows models, but there's a lovely model, just before I talk to this on the right here, called Johari's window. I don't know if anybody's heard of Johari's window. And Johari, it sounds like an overseas name. It's not. It's a guy called John and a guy called Harry from America. They shortened their names. They got Johari and they did this fantastic model, a feedback model, and it gets to know yourself. It talks about your blind self as well, things that others know about you that you don't know and they haven't told you. And then there's things that you don't know and they don't know. And you have to discover that as you go through life. And there's things that you know that you don't want anybody else to know, which are your secrets. So it's a really good model. If anybody wants to follow the model and do the test, there's a free online test, and it's Johari's window. Another way of doing this is annual appraisal. I don't know if you have annual appraisal in Vodafone. Some companies do it, some companies don't. Whatever appraisal process you use is another way of getting feedback. And again, I go back to my point. What do I do with this information? I've had some feedback from the boss. I've had some feedback from colleagues. It's that next step about self-management. What do I do with it? We can have questionnaires. There are many questionnaires out there for self-reflection. I'm going to put a bit of a warning on here in terms of questionnaires and assessments. As we know, there's many online, but I would caveat that with how many are scientifically proven that are online. So just be careful what questionnaires that you do from online. And I'll give you an example. There's a 40 question questionnaire online for emotional intelligence. Absolutely not scientifically proven. It gives you scores out of 10. You generally get between 8 and 9, and you think you're brilliant at emotional intelligence, but it's not scientifically proven. So just bear that in mind for any questionnaire that you take online, and it's free. What they do want is your email address to start sending you stuff to pay for. Top tip. And the other one is 360. There's lots of different methodologies, proper scientifically proven 360s out there. I'm quite confident that Vodafone would probably use these as well. Quite confident you probably would be using some of these as well. But 360 is really good. I'm currently coaching one organization using a 360 tool that they've chosen. And there are some brilliant light bulb moments in it. And actually, if anything, what happens with 360, it tends to be some light bulb moments and things that they didn't even know about themselves. So it kind of links to me back to Johari's window. Not that you need to use Johari's window to do it, but a 360 can give you information you would never get maybe from an introverted person, as an example. They're happy to write it, but they might not be happy to tell you physically face to face. So that's the kind of things that we can do to get some feedback. Just check it. I'm just checking. I'm just checking your chat stuff there, Wilson. That's great. Okay, as I say, anybody got any questions, please put it into chat or do it via Wilson. I'm sure he'll pop up and let me know if there are any. So once we've got that kind of self-awareness piece done, however we do it, however we generate it in all the different methods that I've already mentioned, or any other way that you can think of over and above that, we then have this thing called self-management. We have to do something about what we've learned about ourselves. We have to, for instance, and we've heard some of these lovely words about mindfulness, reflection. You gave me some great words in the chat, and that whole thing about being positive about yourself and having some what we call self-affirming beliefs. Also allow some time for self-reflection. You're all probably working in a very frenetic working world. You're all probably juggling that with your life balance in terms of what's happening at home. You may have some hobbies to do in amongst all that. And it really is fast paced out there, really juggling, really trying to get everything and keep everybody happy, including yourself. So where do we allow that self-reflection time? Question, rhetorical question. Where do you leave the time for yourself? Sit down in the peace and quiet. And I saw that actually in the chat and it was superb. Sit down and have that time to self-reflect. It's really important that we get time to do that. There's also the thing about self-management, about thinking before we act. Saying something and you put your head in your hand, you think, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't sent that email. I wish I hadn't sent that text. I really wish I hadn't done that WhatsApp. It's actually gone to the wrong group. That's happened to me a few times. So really have to think before we press the button, think before we open this thing here, and really listen. And if it's something that's made you angry, for instance, that old concept of stopping and counting to 10 inside your head, it does work. So try some different methods about stopping yourself from reacting in the wrong way. And if you can do that, that's all part of self-management. And I'll just give a very quick example. Banging your toe in the corner of the bed. How many people have banged their toe somewhere around the bedroom, either the drawers or the corner of the bed? And it's really sore, really sore. And you just want to shout as many expletives as you can in 10 seconds. Then you realize the children are listening, or you've upset your other half because of the language that's been used. But really, as sore as the toe might be, when you've banged it, have a think about how else could I deal with that? And it's just stopping, counting to 10, and you think, okay, it was an accident, it happened. We've also got this thing, and again, I saw this in the chat, which was fantastic, developing skills for breathing, in through the nose and out through the mouth, the sitting posture in our seats, and that whole thing around relaxation. Mindfulness is becoming a much bigger and bigger thing over the last 3 years from what I'm seeing. And then that whole thing about developing self-soothing and self-motivation skills. What kind of things really do float your boat? If it's reading a book, if it's watching a TV program, if it's just putting some headphones on and listening to some music, if it's going for a dog walk, if it's just going for a walk, but just do something different to get away, for instance, from this thing here that we keep staring at in the last 13, 14 months. So how might we do that? And then I think the bottom line here for me is maintaining some really good physical health. How do we do that? Especially when gyms have been shut, there are many, many different ways that we can maintain our health. But healthy diet would probably come in amongst this as well. All to do, and it all links back to self-management. These are the kind of things I'm talking about. Mindfulness. I wouldn't suggest you go and find the tallest mountain to go and find it, but a bit of mindfulness is really, really good. And have a think about, I would say, kind of one of the concluding remarks is, what makes your day great? What makes your day great at work? What makes your day great at home as well? And I did mention the physical fitness. Me personally, I've stopped doing the one-arm press-ups. I find it's just a bit embarrassing when people are watching me, so I go back to 2-arm press-ups now. But again, if that's what you do to keep fit, absolutely fantastic. Walking, cycling, in the gym if you can get to a gym, but you don't need to have a gym. You can do lots of the gym things outside as well. So once we've got this kind of self-awareness piece done, then we go and have a look and we do this self-management piece. And we think, okay, we're getting somewhere now with that emotional intelligence. We're kind of building a bit of a theme here, and we're doing the steps nicely. We then have to think about, okay, I'm kind of beginning to sort myself out, which is great. What about those people that are around me? What about those people who are at work? And what about those people who are at home? And how might I use my emotional intelligence? Because I'm now self-aware. I know how to manage myself. And we've got this great word that everybody was talking about. We've got this great word called empathy. And again, you ask some people what they mean by empathy, and it's quite surprising. And it's probably worth doing at work as well with your colleagues. Just ask them what they think empathy means. Lots of people get empathy mixed up with sympathy, and they're nothing like each other. They are totally different. And I think the whole thing around empathy for me is understanding another person's emotions. Very much like the statement that Goldman made at the beginning of the slideshow. Understanding their emotions, understanding what they need, and understanding what their concerns are. And we can only do this if we have conversations with them. So if we have staff members that are introverts and they don't talk to us and we don't talk to them, we'll never get that empathetic kind of relationship going. So we need to engage. So we need to ask the right questions in the right time and in the right way so that we get that understanding and that empathy with people. We also then, if we've got the empathy piece and we know what that be, again, it's a phrase that everybody uses for empathy. It's almost the ability to walk a mile in the shoes of the other person. If you had their shoes on for the day, how would you feel? Just have a think about it in that way if you're visual. Put yourself in their shoes, take yourself on their journey that they're going on. How would you feel? Then you might get to understand the emotions, the needs, and the concerns of that other person. So if we've got the kind of empathy piece going and we understand what empathy is and we can take it forward, and there's this whole thing around organizational awareness, the ability to understand the politics, little p or big P, whether it's politics within your team, politics with your customers, your suppliers, politics with other parts of your organization, but how do they affect the team that they're working within your environment or the teams that are not in your environment? So organizational awareness is crucial in terms of emotional intelligence in the working environment. And again, recognizing I've got a bit of an understanding of what Agile does and what Scrum does, but that whole thing when you're gathering all these people together, they might come from different areas of the business, and that is part of organizational awareness. How well do we know them? How well do we know what they do and how they do it? And then we've got this thing that Goldman calls service. in terms of emotional intelligence. And what we mean by service is the ability to understand and meet the needs of your clients or meet the needs of your customers. What is it that delights them? What is it that you have that they need and they really appreciate what it is? Is it a service? Is it a product? Is it a combination of both? But do we really understand our clients? Do we really understand our customers? And do we know what delights them in terms of the service as a product, as a service delivery that they're looking for? And once we've kind of got that, this then takes us to this piece here, this whole thing around awareness of social situations. So what do I mean by that? What you're doing here now is you carefully consider what people want in this social environment. And that could be social as in work social, or it could be home social. And then once you know what they want and that whole thing around planning on how to communicate with them in a way that's intended to meet those needs. So really is, in terms of customers, as an example, do we really understand our customer? Do we really know what they need? Have we had that deep and meaningful conversation with them to get the clarity and to get that understanding? And it's all about people. It's all about people. It's all about communication. And if we can communicate, if we can ask the right questions, if we can listen empathetically, not just listen, but listen empathetically, and there's a huge difference, and actively listening, you know, leaning in and having the eye contact, especially when we're using this thing here in front of us, and have been for the last 12 months in particular. I know you're probably using it before, but nowadays we're having to use it almost all the time. But just having an awareness of what social situation are we in? And the same when you're having your scrums, I would suggest. I mean, what is our situation? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What is our end game in terms of having the projects or the programs that we are running? And making sure there's absolute clarity around that. So then using empathy, we can drive results. This is what Goleman says. And this is what I like about Goleman. And this is his statement. If you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are, so high up in the IQ, for instance, no matter how high you are in IQ, you are not going to get very far. So what he's saying is we need to have empathy. We need to have empathy. We need to have effective relationships. It's nothing to do with how smart you are. It's nothing to do with how clever you are. It's actually about how emotionally intelligent you are. And I'm pretty sure you've got lots of really good emotionally intelligent bosses there as well. So I'll just kind of give a little quote from a lady called Reese, and she does some lots of research on emotional intelligence. And what she says is she notes that empathy in the workplace sets the tone that people matter. She talks about a culture of empathy giving people the benefit of the doubt, and then they're probably doing their best. And if for some reason they're not, it seeks to understand what might be impeding good performance before judging or punishing. And then she goes on to say that L&D professionals can help leaders to develop this keen sense of understanding by encouraging them to get to know their team members. That is crucial, no matter what business you are in, whether it's policing, whether it's making widgets, whether it's making phones, whether it's whatever industry you are in, you need to know your team members. Same in sport, absolutely the same in sport. So you need to know our team members' individual strengths and their unique strengths. We also need to know their weaknesses or their areas to develop on a really deep level. And once we get that understanding, that's where our social awareness is really good and we can take things forward. I'll just have a stop there. I'm just conscious that I've done a lot of talking. Any questions from anybody? I know you're watching Sli.do, Wilson. Hopefully I'm hitting the mark in terms of putting across what emotional intelligence is for everybody as well. I don't see any questions. Oh, hang on, I'm just checking my chat's on the bottom screen. It's not in the top screen. Just 2 seconds. Yeah, I would agree, Wilson. Product people, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have any question in Sli.do as yet. Just one.
Okay, that's fine.
From me.
I'm just looking at Rashid's comment. Rashid saying, "Understand to listen, not to reply." That's absolutely spot on. I love that, Rashid. Yeah, and I always talk about we've got 2 of these and 1 of these, and the reason is we need to use more of these to listen and not try to butt in and think we know what the person's saying and actually cut them off and then keep on going through. So it really is a case of stop and listen. And that comes back to self-awareness again. If we're one of these people that just can't help ourselves and we need to start talking, we know we do it. What do we do about it? We have to manage it. We have to stop ourselves. I heard a phrase very recently about people that do that need to imagine they've got super glue on their lips and their lips are stuck shut whilst they listen. Really good until you have to go and open your lips. And metaphorically, you think you've super glued them. I'm going to take you on to the next piece now, if I may. And this is the emotional intelligence assessment wheel that I was talking about. And I'm not trying to sell a product or sell anything at all. I'm really here to kind of put across what emotional intelligence is. And this, as far as I'm aware, and the guy that teaches me is a bit of a UK guru, and he invites me back every 6 months for a free upgrade and a free kind of refresher, which is fantastic. But this, as far as we are aware, is the only emotional intelligence scientifically proven psychometric assessment tool out there in the world. It's very accurate. It asks 133 questions. I know, because I've done it twice now in the last 5 years, and it's really accurate, and it gives you a reading. And what I will say is, I just put it talks about here, that wheel, I'm not expecting to kind of learn the wheel in any way, shape or form. It's got what we call 5 composites: stress management, self-perception, interpersonal, self-expression, and decision-making. And then you'll see it breaks down into kind of subscales, 15 subscales. And then, believe it or not, it doesn't show you on here, but there's a 16th subscale. And the 16th subscale measures your level. You're doing coaching and somebody's level of happiness isn't reaching the average mark of 100, and you have that conversation, it's quite an and again, scientifically proven, so not something in the pie thing off the internet. So what does it do then? So if you use this tool, or a scientifically proven tool that measures emotional intelligence, it allows your organization to recruit highly emotionally intelligent and balanced individuals. And I'm going to come back to this, because for me,
I don't know if it's just me or we are losing you.
Okay, I just noticed a little bit of a thing there, Wilson.
Okay.
Just noticed. Just keep telling me if you do start to a little thing got to say your internet is unstable or something. I've got like 300 megabytes per second, so it shouldn't be unstable. It's probably because it's this time of night and all the kids have gone on or something. Not that there's kids in my house. Just stop me again, Wilson, if you start losing me. So I'm just going back to this whole thing about the recruit. Use this tool for recruiting highly emotionally intelligent people, but it's got to be balanced. It's not about scoring high scores. It's about getting level scores and balanced scores. And I will talk you through a case study very shortly. It's also about identifying talent with the potential for promotion, and you can support their growth through their time in your organization as well. So it's a really good HR tool in terms of being able to use it. So spot people for the future as well. Good news, it can develop managers. It can develop anybody. It doesn't have to be managers. Absolutely anybody organization. Doesn't even have to be in a working organization. It can develop your skills and support technical competencies. That's what's great about it. And again, if you look at the subscales on that wheel, you'll probably recognize how it does that. It also helps to improve team, because you can do emotional intelligence for teams, not just for individuals, and organizational performance. So that, yeah, bottom line is, why would we buy any of this kind of stuff? It's to improve the bottom line. And that's what it does. It also allows you to support leadership development programs with one-to-one coaching. Anybody that takes an assessment, for me, you'd be absolutely mad not to take the coaching that goes with it. It's a bit like going to the doctors. You don't tell the doctor anything about your ailment, and the doctor gives you a bottle of pills. So what's the pills for? The doctor hasn't even listened to me yet. So we need to put the two things together, do the assessment and get some coaching to get your EQ balanced, in my view, as opposed to getting the numbers up high. It's nothing to do with high numbers, in my view, my personal view. What else does it do? If you've got emotionally intelligent salespeople, guess what? They have that relationship with their clients or potential clients. They know how to have those conversations, and sales and service delivery goes up. It's absolutely proven. I'm not just saying this, it's absolutely proven. So let me just take you through a case study. And this Duncan does exist. He's on LinkedIn. I also haven't put his second name there for obvious reasons. And Duncan, this case is about 4 years old now. Duncan was brought into an organization, and it was in the Midlands. It was a construction firm, and the construction firm had a turnover, but it started going downhill, and it was actually becoming to start making losses. So they put a hire out. They did this kind of headhunting stuff, and they hired in Duncan, head of HR, and the chief exec thought, checked his profile out, got a brilliant ground record in terms of where he's been before and making businesses turn over and improve. Great stuff. So what they got in was Duncan, seen as a pace setter, one of Daniel Goleman's leadership traits, pace setting, for those that follow Goleman's leadership, his 6 leadership traits. And he gets stuff done. That's Duncan. He's great. He had an excellent salary given to him. And if he could turn around, he was up for a 50% bonus. What more do you need? What a world Duncan's come into to get this turnaround. Coaching support required. So 3 months was needed. He was put on an emotional intelligence assessment, and he was given some coaching. And you've got to think, why? We've searched him, we've done some research, we've done the background checks. This is the guy that's going to turn us around. And he did. He started making profit. Started making great profit in his first 3 months. And there was a but. Staff were starting, his staff and his ops team were starting to call in sick. Never happened before. Why are they calling in sick? Even worse, after another 2 months, people resigned. 2 people resigned. That's not good. So that's 2 months, sorry, within the time of him being appointed, they resigned. Okay, so we're still making profit, all going well. Duncan focused on the job and he forgot about his people, which is really sad. He also he had a really good high level of stress tolerance as per the wheel. He also didn't enable or encourage anybody. You can probably guess what Duncan was very low in. I'll let you guess. He was very low in one particular subscale, and I'm talking really low, but I'll get to that in a few seconds. In working for Duncan, there were, and his team, absolutely no joy. So that was done. So within 2 months, people resigned. He came in, he did do the turnover, he did increase the sales, but there was a cost to he did the assessment.
Rob, I think we've lost you for like 4 or 5 seconds. If you were saying something, we didn't get that.
All right, I will just wait. I'll just take my time. I'm just saying, so it's great having Duncan in. He did the turnaround and got some new business.
Rob, we're still losing you. Probably if you stop your video only, maybe it can help.
Stop my
Let's
video.
try that.
Okay. Yeah. Hang on, let's try that then.
Your webcam.
Yeah, hang on, 2 seconds. Okay, stop the video. Let's see what happens now. Doesn't usually happen this time of night, so something going a bit scary here. Yeah, just saying about Duncan. Let me just kind of talk about Duncan's scores then. So we have this wheel, we do this assessment, the average score in the UK, and it's different for different continents. In the UK, the average score is 100. So what Duncan scored was in stress tolerance, 117. That's high, really high. So he copes with stressful situations. His second highest score was problem solving, 113. Above the UK average, really good at problem solving. So he finds solutions when emotions are involved. His lowest score was reality testing, and his score was 33 out of 100. 33. I've never seen a score that low ever. So he just did not have a clue what was going on around him. The fact that people were going sick, the fact that 2 people resigned, he wasn't seeing it. So as far as he was concerned, everything was okay. He just did not see it. His objective was make the profit, get the business done, no matter what the cost in terms of people around him and who surrounded him. His second lowest score was empathy. Empathy, Duncan scored 41. Again, 60 points adrift of the UK national average. So he had no understanding or appreciation about how anybody in his team felt. Really, really bad scores. But the good thing was he recognized that after he'd taken the test. And I've actually got his new scores in front of 3 lots of code. His original EQ score out of 100 was 4. When he did the test after 3 coaching sessions, his average went to 114. His empathy, I'm only going to cover 2 of them. His empathy went from 41 to 83. It doubled, but it still doesn't meet 100, which is the UK national average. He did carry on and have some more coaching sessions after that. But the bottom line is, it proved through the coaching and the focus on getting things balanced. The first thing with Duncan was get things near to 100, never mind balanced, because he just had really low scores in many, many areas. What does it all mean? That's the question. What does all this stuff on assessment scoring all mean? What if you were working for Duncan then? Very decision making, high stress tolerance, but low on empathy, no idea what's going on around him, very low on reality testing, not good. What would it feel like if you had to go in that office every day? Big clue, 2 people went sick and 2 people resigned from their post. Not a good place to be. If you were a qualified you'd be looking at his scores and trying to balance them. What we do is we look at scores and try to get them, anything that's above 10 difference, we look to try and get them close to each other through coaching and giving Duncan some ideas about how he can improve self. This was all about self-awareness, the very first step of emotional intelligence. We need to get him more self-aware so that he can improve. So training on those imbalances and then what they mean for the delegate. So it's just making sure that we get those things through. It did work. And Duncan's now very, very successful, still with that organization with a much higher emotional intelligence score. But let's go back to my IQ stays the same until you're 19, doesn't get any better. EQ, all of us can change it. It can go down as well. It can go down and it can go up. My own empathy went down during COVID because I did 2 tests and I took one near the end of COVID. I don't meet anybody. I only stay in this hut for 14 months. I don't see humans. Who am I going to be empathetic with other than this camera? So that's where my empathy dropped about 6 points, but I'm aware of it. And it's just something I need to be managing when I'm allowed out. And we're all allowed out. And I can go and see Wilson again. I'm just going to take us through to the benefits then of emotional intelligence. Hopefully that was just a very short case study on Duncan. The benefits, a high and a balanced level of emotional intelligence helps us to communicate better. It does reduce our anxiety and our stress, and it helps us to diffuse conflicts, improves our working and social relationships. It allows us to empathize with others, especially if we didn't know what empathy was to start with. And it effectively helps us to overcome life challenges. So it's not just a work-based thing. And I hope that's coming across okay. Our emotional intelligence affects the quality of our lives because it influences our behavior at work. It allows us to improve our social relationships. So it can be a work-related thing and it can be a home-related thing. And it can be a hobby-related thing as well. So just some concluding remarks, if I may. I'm happy to take any questions. Everybody's born with EI, every single person on the planet. It's knowing where your start point is that's important, really important. Improving your EI is very easy once you know how. COVID is having an impact on our EI, and I'm living proof of that. I've done 2 tests over a 14-month period, and I've seen some things drop down and some other things push up. And I've still got imbalances, believe it or not. All of us probably will have. It's what we're doing about it that's really important. EQI 2.0 is a scientifically proven assessment tool, and it's used globally. It's used by a company called MHS. Knowing your score isn't enough. It's very well taking a test. It's all about balancing your score across the 5 composites and the 15 subscales. That's what's really important. That's just the certificated. If you see somebody that's got that with their name and their organization, you know that they're certified practitioner. They're not just going along saying, I can give you a test that you can do online and I can give you some coaching. So don't be fooled by anybody that's not qualified. That's okay, Wilson. That takes me to the last slide. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And apologies if my internet has been interfering with my talking.
I think it was Duncan's. He's been hearing this. So
I think Duncan, yeah, he could be in the house.
he's messing with your internet. Okay. Thanks. Thank you very much, Rob. We have few questions here in Slido. I'll just read a few of them, and if anyone here wants to put a question forward here, just raise your hand and I will unmute you. So let's start with the first one, which was mine. Is there any way I could improve my boss EI?
That's a really good question, Wilson. I guess it's just making your boss aware of what EI is. That's the first thing. It's all about feedback. It just comes back to that thing we were talking about earlier, Wilson. It's about giving your boss some feedback, and it's how you do that feedback. And I know some bosses won't listen. They'll just let it go over their head. But in some way, shape, or form, you need to give your boss feedback. Even if you say, "Oh, I had a really interesting kind of presentation last night, all about emotional intelligence. What do you know about emotional intelligence, boss?" "Oh, right. Yeah. Did you know it can be improved? Did you know it's the subscales? Do you know it's this? Do you know it's that? Do you mind if I give you some feedback?" And I think if you just ask for permission first and then give the feedback, then why not? And a lot of it is, Wilson, what I'm finding around lots of organizations is it's all about, it's not in the culture to give feedback. Yeah, and it's not that people are in fear of giving feedback. It's just not necessarily the culture of the organization. But until somebody is given feedback, then you don't know what the reaction is. What we've got to be careful of is we're not being presumptuous about what the response is going to be on that feedback. So it's all about self-awareness, give the feedback and wait to see what the answer is.
Stuff. Thank you, Rob. There's another one, anonymous. So, how does one practice empathy but keeping boundaries?
Well, that's a really good question. Again, that's about having a very open dialogue with the person that you want to have that empathy with, in my view. Again, having a very deep and open conversation. And that's what we're talking about, the depth of how we do this. And just having that open one-to-one to say, I need to be talking to you about what's going on. I can see it from your perspective, or I think I can see it from your perspective. Can you tell me what it feels like? Can you tell me what it sounds like? You know, using those senses, and so I can get a perspective about what's happening in your life, what's happening in your workplace. And once I have that understanding, this is a social awareness piece, Wilson. Once I've got the social understanding and the awareness of my colleague, and then I can suggest, maybe you need some training, maybe you need some coaching, maybe you need to go and do some emotional intelligence stuff, whatever you can suggest to help that other person. But I get the boundaries thing, and it is within those kind of parameters of what is safe and what is unsafe. And what we're not trying to be here, Wilson, we're not trying to be counsellors in any way, shape or form. There's a huge difference between coaching, as I'm sure everybody in the audience knows, between coaching somebody and counselling somebody. And that might be part of that barriers and the parameters thing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And would you agree that, for example, in a coaching situation where we want in a coaching situation where we want to help someone improve, okay, we use empathy to meet that person where they are, but we don't want to stay there, because what we want is that person to give a first step towards something, right? Would you agree that using empathy, but at the same time, just as a way to invite that person to move?
Yeah, I would say, Wilson, again, really good question. It's all about empathetic listening. That's what I would be using my empathy, is my empathetic listening, which is different to active listening. It is that thing about listening from the heart and putting myself in that person's position to really feel it. But it's all about getting the other person to be aware. And if you can do that, if you can make sure that they become aware of whatever it is you're trying to coach, and allow them then to suggest what the options are. So, and that's that whole thing, that difference between coaching and mentoring coming in now. Making sure we're coaching and we're not mentoring. And if we're coaching, let them identify what the issues might be, and let them identify through brilliant questioning what the options might be. But always making sure that you've got that empathetic listening ear in the whole conversation. And what I would say, Wilson, it's more difficult to do that in the way that we're talking with each other right now, because we can't see each other's body language. And that's one of the frailties of coaching online, as I'm sure hopefully people in the audience will agree with me here. I've been coaching online a lot recently, and there's a huge gap for me in terms of this whole body language piece. And you need the body language piece to really get the empathy side of it as well.
Thank you. If anyone wants to put a question, I've allowed you to unmute yourselves. If anyone has a burning question now.
I like that. Sorry,
Okay.
Everybody's usually worked with a Duncan or a Mrs. Duncan before. I've worked with quite a few Duncans in my lifetime, I can tell you, and it's not a nice place to be.
Not really a question, but I just wanted to emphasize what you mentioned, Rob, about the coaching online, which is effectively more difficult. I mean, I had the situation where I have hired someone during COVID, during the pandemic, so that the person joined in October, and that person resigned in February, right? Wow. And I did not see this coming.
Right.
I did not see this coming. The person was really capable. He was able to manage really a complex project.
Yeah.
But he was apparently in a stressful situation. But I was not able to figure this out. It's just afterwards that I realized that the person started to not show the camera when we were having one-to-one.
Yeah.
And I was also seeing him online very late and with the either do not disturb or focusing. So I had some hints, but I did not pay attention. So I think as a manager now, we really need to learn about how to use the online hints that we have to be able to collect those information. Because as you mentioned, there are we're going to lack information, we're going to lack the eye contact, the body language, etc. So we need to find tricks to be able to get those information that are really key. Right? Not showing the camera, for example, or etc. etc.
Yeah, I agree, Rashid. You're right. It's about behavioral change. That's what you're seeing. But you're seeing digital behavioral change as opposed to physical, because we're not together, we're not face to face, sadly. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the amount of contention I've had in the training world about delegates not putting their camera on. And you're just thinking, are they actually there? Are they participating? Are they doing something else? Are they working? Are they not even at the seat? You just don't know. Me personally, especially for coaching, I probably wouldn't do it if they wouldn't put the camera on, to be honest with you, Rashid. That would be my kind of take on that. I need to see the eyes at the very least.
I would argue if Rashid was a Duncan, but I know Rashid quite well, so I know that he's not a Duncan. It was not his fault.
Yeah, you don't want a Duncan. You don't want a Duncan.
Yeah. So we have a few more questions before we close. And this there are two questions here. One from Tim that I've put on his behalf. How to measure EI, and the other one is from me that probably is very related. Is how can we learn how to use this EQ assessment, which probably is what it leads to measuring the EI.
Yeah. As I say, if you know where your starting point is, if you know what your levels are, if you know what your assessment scores are, and for me, it's, as I've mentioned before, it's not necessarily about having high scores. It's looking to see where the imbalances are. And as an example, just use Duncan as an example. Very high on decision making, 120 something, but very low on empathy. So you've probably seen bosses that are great at making decisions, but they actually don't care who it impacts on. So if that is me, I'm thinking, right, I might need to actually be coming back off the decision-making piece and kind of coming up down a bit and then really focusing on that empathy bit to bring that up, if that's the two that I'm trying to rebalance. But there are lots of sets of two things within the 15 subscales that we look to try and balance together. And all that's done, it's all there for the coach. The coach is kind of pointed towards certain things, but it's not the coach's choice. And I hope that's the second part of the question here, Wilson. It's the individual's choice. It's the coachee's choice about, and the phrase that we always use is, there's your scores, there's your assessment. Where do you want to start? That's how we start the session. What are your observations on your scores? Where do you want to start? So it's never the coach that kind of leads on it in any way, shape or form, which is maybe a little bit different to kind of steady state coaching, if I can use that phrase. But we would always ask, where do you wish to start? And sometimes you'll get, well, I don't know, you tell me. Well, what do you think of your scores? Yeah, what do you think's looking well? Which bits do you think you could develop? And it's obvious, because it's a score of high or low, and then the imbalance, then it's kind of quite obvious where to then go with it.
Stuff. Fotis here has asked if you can turn on your camera, and he started the movement here. Since he asked this, many other people started the camera.
Yeah, I'm back on again.
Yeah, and okay, so there is one last question here on Sli.do, which is stress is something that can hinder EI, emotional intelligence. How to tame the EI to handle stress?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. I always have this phrase, Wilson, that stress is a symptom of a problem. It's not the problem itself. So what we need to find out is what is causing us the stress. And this has taken us right back to step one about self-awareness. Self-awareness is all about what things do cause me stress, what situations cause me stress. So I say stress is just a symptom of a problem. Is it something that I can't manage at work? Is it a person that I cannot control or can't manage at work? Is there something happening at home that I'm bringing to work and that's causing me stress at work? So a really good coach, through open questioning technique and linear questioning technique, will help the person to identify what's the cause of the stress, because that's the bit that we need to address. What can we do to reduce it? Maybe it is things like, what do I need to stop doing? What do I need to start doing? And what do I need to stop doing? And in some cases, and I've seen it in my old police world, in some cases it's as serious as, you shouldn't be in this job. This job is not the right job for you, and that's what the big cause of your stress is. And I'm hoping that's not the case for everybody in the audience, but sometimes we have to be really honest with ourselves in terms of that self-awareness thing, and recognize I've taken on a job that I just cannot cope with it. But really, for me as the coach, I've got to find out what's the reasons you cannot cope. And I've got to ask the right open questions to help that person to help themselves. And that's where I see it's coaching and not mentoring deliberately. Does that help, Wilson?
Well, it wasn't mine.
I
hope it has helped. If I can add my personal take on this, when I read this, I do think that as we improve our emotional intelligence, as we become more aware and more mindful, I think it helps to decrease the level of stress. Because imagine that I'm here on this call, my internet is failing, and I started becoming stressed, right?
Yeah.
If it's something that I've already thought about, or if I'm mindful, is okay, well, what can I do at this moment? Are there things that are under my control? Maybe I can switch for my 5G. Maybe can I use a personal hotspot? Or maybe I can just drop a message here and saying that I'm not able to join, or something like that, right? So I do really think that as we improve our emotional intelligence, we cope much better with dealing with stress. And another thing that I've been personally doing, it's been a year now that I've started, is bullet journaling. So by the end of the day, I write about things that happened during the day. In many occasions, I even write how did I feel about a meeting or about an engagement with someone. And that kind of helps me rationalize as well what were my emotions, and it helps me prepare for my next engagement. The next time I feel the same thing, it's already wired and I know how to deal better. So uh, in a personal level, I do this and it's helping me. Hopefully many others can do that or have experimented doing that as well. No more questions on Sli.do. If anyone wants to have a last question, please, you can unmute yourself.
Somebody's asked me, Wilson, my favorite book, and sadly it links to how I was trained, but it's The EQ Edge by Stephen Stein. It's a really good book. There's also another book called Leading Beyond the Ego it's 3 people wrote it, but one of them's called Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T. Leading Beyond the Ego is a good book as well. But if you want to learn all about emotional intelligence, I would say The EQ Edge is the book. Stephen Stein's written another book very recently, which I'm just started to read as well. I think it's just called The EQ. I don't think it's called The Edge. It's like an update 5 years later on this particular book that I'm reading or have read. I've read it a few times now. A good question about the books. Love EQ. I'm sorry, and the other one would be Daniel Goleman, obviously, because he is the guru of emotional intelligence, and his is just called Emotional Intelligence, and it was printed in 1994. Again, you can get a version of the book where you do some self-analysis. It's like a double thick, so you've got some work things that you can do. You can actually take yourself through the back end of the book and do some self-analysis on yourself, which is great. If you want to do that, you can get it as well. Good question on the books.
One comment
Rashid?
I would like to make, if we still have time, Wilson.
Yeah, I think we can spare 2 minutes before we close.
Yeah, you mentioned about the journaling. I think linked to that and linked also to the stress, what I'm doing on a daily basis is that when I finish my day, I look at obviously what I've done, but what I've not been able to complete, and then I reshuffle my next day or my remaining days. Because to stress because I haven't been able to come, because then I take 2-3 minutes and I know exactly what I will be doing, and then I will reshuffle my agenda accordingly and move eventually some meetings that are less important. Just a tip I wanted to share with you.
Yeah,
no, that's good self-management, Rashid. I'd say to that. That's all about self-awareness, so you know what would stress you out, so you then know how to control that by doing things. Somebody did ask a question, I know we've got not a lot of time left. Somebody asked me a question about could you taint the results with the 133 questions? You cannot, because it's scientifically measured. I'll just show you that's my last assessment there and here. One of the pages, one of the very early pages, it actually says one, it times how long you took to do it. The average person takes about 12 minutes. And the other one it'll cross-refer. The questions are obviously done deliberately to cross-refer. So if you said 5 on one and then 1 for the exact same thing, it was asked slightly differently, they'll know that there's something wrong. And it will point it out to you as the practitioner to ask the questions around it. So if anybody does do anything and thinks they're kind of cheating the system, it will spot it straight away. But as the coach, you're given that information in advance, that person doesn't know, and you ask the questions around it. Actually, one of the questions at the very end is, have you answered this questionnaire honestly on a 1 to 5? It actually does ask the very last question, question number 133. Okay, Wilson?
Okay. Guys, thank you very much. Rob, thank you very much. Was wonderful to learn a little bit more about emotional intelligence and how can we use it as well, and having a starting point from here, whoever wants to explore this a little bit more. Please do leave feedback, and the recording will be available on the YouTube channel. And yeah, please provide feedback. Have a great evening. And once again, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the engagement tonight. It's been really good. Really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. I'll get in touch with you, Wilson. Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Bye-bye.
Bye.